The radio hissed the way a snake breathes before it strikes. Out here in Lamar Valley, sound carries different. It crawls over the snow, echoes through steam, and dies against the ridges like it's afraid to go too far. I was the only ranger on night patrol that week. Wind chill -20. Visibility 3 feet of white. And a storm that hadn't been on any forecast moving straight across the valley like a curtain being pulled. I'd done 2 tours in Iraq. I thought I'd seen hell. Then I met Yellowstone in winter. The ATV's treads chewed through powder, engine humming steady under me. Thermal visor up, rifle strapped to the side, coffee long gone cold. The park at night always feels alive, like the whole forest is breathing around you. Sometimes you hear elk calls. Sometimes you hear nothing at all, and that's worse. The call came at 02:14 a.m. A drone distress ping. NPS Recon Unit 4, assigned to survey the geothermal zone near Soda Butte. I frowned. The drones were grounded after dusk because tourists kept mistaking them for UFOs, but this one had launched itself 20 minutes ago, unauthorized. The GPS blinked coordinates 2 miles north, right at the edge of a thermal basin that had boiled a grizzly last year. Copy, I muttered into the mic, knowing no one was listening. Dispatch was 40 miles out, probably asleep behind a desk. I revved the ATV and went. The storm thickened. Snow like ash, sky like concrete. My visor lit up with thermal ghosts, hot vents under the crust, a few elk huddled near the trees, and something large moving on 2 legs that vanished when I blinked. I told myself it was a glitch. The drone's beacon led me to a clearing by the river, steam rising from the banks, trees bent from wind. The beacon light flashed through the fog like a dying heartbeat. Next to it sat a black SUV half buried in snow. I killed the engine, let the silence wrap around me. 2 figures stood by the hood, waving flashlights. A man and a woman, late 40s, wrapped in designer parkas that didn't belong in the back country. The man's voice cut through the wind, deep and calm. "Thank God, you must be Ranger Harlan." "Jack," I said, stepping off the ATV. "You folks lost." "Car trouble," he said. "Engine died out of nowhere, GPS too." The woman smiled, red hair, accent somewhere between Boston and theatre school. We were on our way to Old Faithful, romantic getaway. I glanced at the license plate. Wyoming tag, but the numbers didn't match the registry I knew by heart. "Fake. Mind if I take a look?" I asked. "Please," the man said, stepping aside. "Victor Blackwood, this is my wife Elena." I popped the hood. The engine was cold, too cold, like it had been sitting here for hours. And under the frost I saw something odd, a small disc glued to the battery casing. GPS tracker, military grade. When I looked up, both of them were watching me, too still, too calm. The wind died completely. No sound, not even from the trees. Then the river screamed. Steam erupted along the banks, hissing, roaring, bright red under the thermal lens. Something big moved in it, displacing the fog like a shark in bloody water. Elena's smile didn't move. "Don't shoot," she whispered. "He's close." "Who's close?" Victor turned toward the river, his breath steady, eyes glowing faint gold in the beam of my light. "The one we came to feed." The fog parted. 8 feet of nightmare stepped out of the geothermal mist. Grey skin stretched thin over bone, eyes like black marble sunk too deep, antlers fused into its skull like rusted knives. The heat rising from its body melted snow in a 10-foot radius. It sniffed the air, slow, deliberate. The smell of burning meat filled the valley. My hands moved before thought did. AR-15 up, safety off, 3-round burst. The shots cracked the night open, 1, 2, 3. The creature staggered. Steam poured from the wounds instead of blood. Then it straightened, eyes blazing with heat. The bullet holes glowed, sealing shut as the air temperature spiked 20 degrees. "Get down," I shouted. But the Blackwoods didn't move. They knelt. Elena raised her hands to the beast like a preacher at revival. "We bring the offering. Take what's yours." Victor smiled at me. "It's nothing personal, Ranger. You were simply convenient." The creature screamed. The sound wasn't just noise. It was hunger made physical. The snow exploded. I hit the ground, rolled behind the ATV, and fired again. Single shots controlled center mass. The rounds barely slowed it. Heat shimmered off its skin, warping the air. It swung one claw through the snowmobile. Metal shrieked, sparks flew. My ride became a bonfire. I crawled backward, pulse hammering, lungs burning from sulfur in the steam. The beast turned toward me, head cocked. It didn't rush, it didn't need to. That calm, that was the part that broke me. My training kicked in before panic did. I yanked the flare from my vest, lit it, and threw it into a nearby vent. The explosion of gas and flame turned night into day. The creature howled and fell back, skin blistering. I ran. The ATV was gone. The forest waited. I sprinted through knee-deep powder, breath coming in white knives, ears ringing from the flare blast. Behind me I heard footsteps, heavy, measured, impossibly fast. Branches snapped like bones. The storm swallowed the world, and the world swallowed sound. I dove behind a fallen pine, ripped the thermal cam from my pack, and aimed it back toward the clearing. Through the blizzard, the image flared bright orange, the creature crouched by the SUV feeding. Feeding on Victor and Elena. I should have looked away, I didn't. Their screams were short, then nothing. The Wendigo lifted its head. Through the thermal scope, I saw it turn slowly toward me. It shouldn't have been able to see heat through a blizzard. But it did. And it smiled. I ran until my legs gave out. The ranger outpost loomed ahead, metal, concrete, salvation. I slammed the door, locked it, collapsed against the wall. Outside, the wind howled again. Only this time, the howl had a voice. Jack. It dragged my name through the snow like a secret. I checked my rifle, half a mag left, barrel steaming. My hands shook, but not from cold. I'd heard voices in the desert before, but this one felt closer. Real. On the monitor, the drone feed flickered back to life. The last frame it recorded before crashing showed the Blackwoods standing beside that same SUV. No snow, no storm. Timestamp 02:14 a.m. 20 minutes before I arrived. They'd been dead already. Outside, footsteps circled the cabin, slow, deliberate. Steam drifted past the windows. Then the radio clicked on by itself. A voice deep and calm, speaking through static. You survived the offering, Ranger. The hunger remembers. The signal cut. And from the dark beyond the glass, something tapped, 3 times on the windowpane. The outpost was built to outlast weather. Not things that thought. Concrete box, steel door, 2 rooms, 1 generator that coughed like a smoker, a rack with a med kit, 2 radios, 1 flare gun, and a laminated poster about bear encounters that felt like a joke now. The windows were triangle slits, enough to look out, not enough to climb through. The place smelled like diesel, coffee, and wet wool. Something tapped the glass again, 3 slow knuckles, like it was trying on the sound of manners. I stayed off the silhouette of the window and moved low, the way we learned in houses that didn't want us. Safety on, safety off, breath measured. The rifle felt too light all of a sudden. I put it down and lifted the thermal scope instead. Heat bled through snow in a dozen signatures, vents, pipes, the generator, exhaust. Then in the wash of cold, a single vertical flare in the yard. 8 feet, wrong proportions. Heartbeat slow as a metronome. It stood still. It wanted me to think it had left. Then it dragged 1 claw across the door. Metal squealed high and thin. I let the air out slow and turned to the console. Park cams lined the wall, remote towers, trailheads, thermal traps near the basins. Most were dead in the storm. A few limped. I piggybacked the drone feed through a maintenance port, bypassed the NPS front end and drilled into raw packets. Old muscle memory. Iraq never leaves, it just changes uniforms. The last minute of Recon Unit 4 played back in streaks of static. The drone skimmed the geothermal flats. 2 figures by a black SUV. Then a 3rd heat signature walking out of the steam. The drone tried to climb, too late. The frame filled with teeth and antler and heat. It died mid-scream. I rewound past the impact and watched the SUV again. Something under the hood wired wrong. I scrubbed frame by frame until the pixels gave up a shape. A puck glued to the battery like a leech. Not NPS, not civilian. Something with a 3-letter budget. GPS on the console pinged open sessions across the park. I authenticated with a backdoor I wasn't supposed to keep. A map blossomed, pins in places that shouldn't need watching. Calcite Springs, Mary Mountain, a no-name pull-out near the Tetons. 12 pings. 12 devices just like the puck on the Blackwoods battery. I laid them over missing persons for the last 5 years. The official list stops at 6. The internal log doesn't. 12 more names. 12 gaps where families got postcards from nothing. A folder on the drone's memory hadn't been sent. I cracked it. Photos. 10, 20, 30. Trailcam stills at night. Looking down a road slick with ice. A procession of figures in parkas carrying lanterns that burned cold light. Faces covered. A banner held between 2 of them. The sigil was a circle with antlers and a mouth full of vertical teeth. Ancient hunger. I'd heard the rumour in a bar 2 winters back from a man who couldn't blink right. A church that met in abandoned places. Donation plate full of bone. Songs without words. I told him to go home. I should have asked where. The radio hissed. A carrier wave with breath in it. Then Victor's voice calmed through the snow, even though his lungs were ash now. Ranger Harlan, he said, you brought a rifle to a famine. Elena followed, music at the edge of her vowels. He's starving, Jack. He needs you. I didn't touch the mic. I switched to the short range and killed the main power to the panel. The outpost went to red. Generator took over with a growl. The storm pressed its face to the slit windows and stared. Footsteps circled the building, not the heavy ones. Lighter, a ring of them. I glanced at the thermal again. Ring of cold around the flare of hot. People, cultists. How had they moved so fast in that weather? Maybe they hadn't moved. Maybe they'd been standing there the whole time, quiet as deer. I ran the bolt on the rifle to remind my hands how. The metal answered warm. That helped. I slid the med kit to the door, wedged a pry bar through the handle hasp. Took stock. 6 mags, 5 partial. 1 bandolier of slugs for the 12 gauge I didn't have. Bear spray, flares, a roll of survey flags. 3 quarts of gasoline in red cans. File that for later. Outside, the Wendigo moved to the far window and breathed on it. Frost bloomed, melted, bloomed again. I tasted copper. My heart rate climbed into the red without my permission. I shut my eyes, saw sand instead of snow. .50 cal instead of wind. Voices you never forget calling you brother and then not calling at all. The outpost lights flickered, not from the generator, from the thing outside. It flexed weather like a muscle. The storm obeyed. The pressure changed and I felt the old room in Fallujah constrict around me, the one with the door we couldn't let open. I opened my eyes and said a name I hadn't said in years. It calmed my hands just enough. The radio clicked softer now. Elena again, closer. Come outside, Jack, he won't hurt you, not yet. I thought about the Blackwoods kneeling to be eaten like it was church. I thought about the tracker glued to the battery and the wrong plates, and the way Victor's eyes reflected the lamp weird. I thought about my bronze star, heavy as a lie in my pocket more nights than not. Medicine I never took. I went to the locker and pulled a drawer that stuck in winter. The maintenance crew used it as a junk catch-all. Bolts, wire, a cracked welder's visor, a crucible used for lead sinkers in summer. I held the crucible and heard a bad idea arrive with good timing. Silver. I didn't have silver. I had my mother's wedding ring. I had my medal. I had a coin a kid gave me after I handed him a lost dog last fall. I had regrets. Most aren't metal, some are. I set the crucible in the small forge we used to heat steel for trap repairs. The generator whined when the coils lit. I dropped the ring in first, the coin next, the medal last. It sat there like it wanted to be anything else. The smell when silver goes soft is clean in a way that doesn't feel honest. I shaved slugs off a brass core, packed them with the melt, and let the heat make decisions. Improvised metallurgy in a blizzard while a monster tapped out patience on your wall. I'd done dumber. A thud shook the roof. Slow wait, hand over hand crawling. The snow vent grated, steam drifted down. The Wendigo wanted to come through the exhaust. Smart. The duct was a straight drop to the generator room. I grabbed the ladder, climbed into the crawl, and felt heat hit me like an open oven. The duct glowed dull red. The grate was 3 screws from useless, the 4th stripped. I hurried and the screwdriver slipped and stripped the 3rd too. My hands remembered panic. I told them to think smaller. 1 turn, 1 breath, 1 more. The grate came free. I laid the 12-inch chef's knife across the mouth and wired it to the duct frame. I dumped the bear spray into the vent and struck a flare. Hot orange flooded up. The bear spray atomized and turned the shaft into a narrow hell. I dropped the flare in and yanked the ladder away. A scream came down that wasn't made for human ears. The weight left the roof in a hurry. Something hit the yard hard enough to send the generator into a cough. The lights went low and came back. The smell of burned hair and wet hide pushed through cracks you couldn't find with $1,000. I slid back down and hit the floor awkward. My knee barked. I ignored it and checked the crucible. The silver was ready. I poured quick and dirty into drilled slugs and begged the physics I remembered to round my mistakes. Outside, voices gathered without speaking. Boots in a circle, lanterns lifted. That slow old song with no words rose and fell. I saw them in the slit, 10, maybe more. White masks carved to look like elk skulls, antlers painted black. They had knives slung from cords like faith. I loaded the first silver slug, racked the charging handle and went to the door. I killed the interior light and let the red glow do work. The slit window went black. The world beyond turned into a screen. The circle parted. Someone stepped forward, hood down, no mask. Elena, not eaten, not even bitten. A smear of blood at the corner of her mouth that wasn't hers, eyes bright as fever. She smiled like the first time a lie feels warm. We don't die the way you do, Jack, we change. Behind her, Victor walked out of the steam too. He held up his left hand, palm black with frostbite or ritual. His right eye gleamed pale gold. His breath didn't fog. My finger rested on the trigger, muscle memory tight as a knot. I didn't fire. Not yet. This wasn't a shot. It was a conversation with consequences. Elena tilted her head to the river. He's hungry. I noticed. He called for you, that's an honor. You glued trackers on rental cars and called it faith. We placed wayfinders on offerings, she corrected. Hunger needs help finding its meat in winter. Victor lifted a small device the size of a deck of cards. The same puck I'd seen under the hood. He clicked a side button. The storm thickened around the outpost like ink in water. The wind changed direction without permission. An honor, Elena said again. Be humble. The roof creaked, not from snow, from weight. It had come back fast. The duct hissed. The flare had only made it angry. I could feel heat bleed through the concrete, the kind that licks bone. The thing's breath washed down the wall in a slow, wet exhale. The radio popped. A voice I hadn't heard in years came through from sand and sun. Garcia, dead man, laughing, telling me to keep my head, telling me to go right when everything else said left. The Wendigo had hands in old rooms. I shut my eyes for just a heartbeat and saw Garcia's dog tags hanging on the mirror of a tent that's dust now. Silver. I opened my eyes and loaded another slug. I needed an exit. The outpost had two. The door with 30 friends on the other side and the maintenance hatch that opened into a crawl of pipes behind the fuel shed. The hatch was small. The rifle wouldn't clear. The pack would snag. Panic makes shapes bigger. Training makes them smaller again. I stripped gear to the need. Rifle, 3 mags, flare gun, thermals, 1 gas can with the cap half cracked. I set a trip flare just inside the door at knee height, a second at head, and taped the survey flags on the floor in a path to the hatch, so I could crawl fast in low light without thinking. I grabbed the crucible tongs and fished out 2 more ugly silver slugs. Ugly still kills. I keyed the mic to the encrypted channel and sent a burst transmission packet to the only address that would matter if I didn't make it. An FBI field tip line we'd been told to ignore. Photos attached. GPS coordinates dipped in blood. 1 word in the subject line. Ancient hunger. The send bar crawled. The generator coughed. The roof groaned. The storm leaned in to hear my heartbeat. I cracked the door. Cold hit like a hand. The circle of masks turned. Elena smiled wider, teeth too even. Victor's eyes watched, motionless like a reptile pretending patience. I rolled the gas can into the snow and shot it with the flare gun. The night turned red. Lanterns went to stars. Men that thought they were more than men went to ground. The circle broke. The thing on the roof launched. I saw it midair, a sculpture of famine and winter and old stories told to keep kids near the fire. Jaws open, breath a visible blade. I fired once. Silver met heat. The slug drove into the hollow below its collarbone and went white as it seated. The scream peeled the storm back like wallpaper. It hit the yard hard enough to break a drift in half. The masks scattered. Footprints went to holes. The smell of copper got bigger. My ears rang until the world went muffled. I ran the flags to the hatch and slid into the crawl, pulling the grate shut behind me with numb fingers. The pipe corridor was warm and loud, a metal intestine humming under the old bones of the station. Something slammed the door I'd just left. Trip flares popped and filled the entry with daylight. The roar that followed turned into words again. My name dragged across teeth. I belly crawled through heat until my jacket steamed. The grate at the far end opened to the underside of the fuel shed. Snow sifted through gaps in the boards like flour. I shoved the grate. It stuck. The world on the other side counted slow. 1, 2, 3. The metal gave with a shriek. I slid out into the black under the shed and breathed diesel and pine until the tight in my chest let go a notch. Behind me, the outpost door tore off its hinges. Something heavy went through walls until walls stopped being. I belly wormed to the edge of the crawl, rolled into snow and came up behind the fuel tanks. The forest loomed black and white ribs against the storm. The river sang steam. The shed shielded me for now. My radio vibrated. A text on the encrypted channel shouldn't have been possible, but it was there anyway. No number, no reply, just words. Bring HIM to the mouth. Under it a symbol, circle, antlers, teeth. I looked south. The wind shifted. The night cleared just enough to show a long column of steam lifting into the clouds, like a signal flare the earth set for itself. Old Faithful. The map in my head rerouted. If I stayed, I died in a concrete box. If I ran blind, I froze or got hunted. If I went where it wanted me, I met the mouth. I pulled the second silver slug into my palm and held it until the cold hurt. I thought about the medal in the crucible, turning from something I didn't wear into something that might matter. I thought about Garcia telling jokes in the worst places because the world hated laughing. I picked a line through timber and thermal and decided that surviving wasn't the same as running. When I moved, the Wendigo answered from the ruin of the outpost with a voice like wind through antlers, amused I'd chosen the only direction that would get me killed on time.
Jack.
I didn't look back. The valley opened its ribs. The storm closed around us like a curtain. And somewhere ahead the park exhaled, steady as a ticking clock. The geyser would blow on schedule, so would whatever waited below it. By the time I reached the basin, dawn was a rumour behind the storm. Old Faithful didn't care. The geyser always kept its schedule. You could set a watch to it or a death wish. Steam pulsed upward in slow breaths, the sound deep enough to rattle ribs. The snow here didn't fall. It hovered, melting before it touched the ground. Pools of boiling blue light ringed the clearing like eyes that forgot how to blink. I killed my flashlight, let the sulphur do the rest. The wind carried a sound you don't forget once you hear it, antlers scraping rock. I followed the prints down a ridge carved by meltwater. They weren't humans. Each step was a crater of heat. In the distance, through the fog, the wreck of a service truck sat half submerged in a vent field. Park logo half melted, hood peeled back like an orange. The tracks led straight toward it. Something glinted inside the windshield, reflection of a badge, ranger's badge. I stepped closer, slow. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, blood on the dash but no body. Then the radio crackled. "You're late, Jack." Victor's voice again, smooth, too smooth. I did RSVP. "Come now," he said. "You made yourself part of the circle the moment you shot the god. Elena and you still breathing." A low laugh. Breathing is a human metric. We've moved past that.
Static.
Then, the mouth is open. He's waiting. I should have turned back. I didn't. The path wound deeper into the geothermal fields, where the ground glowed faint orange and the air burned the throat. Signs warned of thin crusts, hidden vents, boiling pools. The wind carried whispers that sounded like language when you weren't ready for it. At the end of the trail stood a cave mouth, black against the steam. A vent long collapsed by quakes, now open again. The edges of the stone were etched with symbols, antlers, eyes, and spirals. Old, older than park records, older than tribes. The ground trembled in rhythm with the geyser. Every 70 minutes, Old Faithful erupted. This one counted down in heartbeats. I chambered a silver round and stepped inside. The heat hit like a wall. Every breath tasted of ash and metal. The tunnel widened fast, opening into a cathedral carved from sulphur and time. Stalactites dripped molten water that hissed when it touched the floor. And in the centre, half merged with the rock, was Elia's crow. The Wendigo. The hunter that ate his partner in a storm 7 years ago and found something ancient waiting in the dark. He wasn't moving now. Kneeling, frozen mid-breath, body fused to the stone. Steam coiled around his chest like the world couldn't decide whether he was alive. The air shimmered. Voices rose from the walls. Victor, Elena, others I'd only seen in files. The cult. Their words weren't prayer, they were code. I realized what the pucks on their SUV were. Not trackers, beacons, a network, each one sending a frequency to this exact point. They weren't feeding the Wendigo anymore. They were waking him. The temperature spiked. The geyser above roared, echoing down the cave like a god clearing its throat. Elias moved. His eyes opened, coal-black, bleeding heat. When he rose, the sound wasn't footsteps. It was plates of rock grinding together. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said. But it wasn't from him. It was inside my head. Images slammed behind my eyes. Soldiers in sand, screams under a broken sky, fire swallowing the horizon. Iraq again, my platoon, Garcia reaching for me through smoke. I was there, not here. The cave became the desert. The Wendigo became the man I left behind. He walked toward me, uniform torn, eyes like pits. "You left me, Jack." "No," I whispered. "You were gone before I could." The hallucination broke when I pulled the trigger. The silver slug tore through Garcia's chest, and the mirage shattered. The Wendigo staggered, real again, whole glowing bright as magnesium. The shot hurt him, but not enough. He roared, steam and blood boiling from the wound. The ground split. From every crack, orange light poured out, magma breathing through stone. I ran for cover behind a boulder slick with condensation. Rocks rained from the ceiling. The geezer's schedule had changed. Eruption in T- now. The floor gave way. I fell into a lower chamber lit by veins of molten rock. At the far end metal glimmered, an altar. On it the Blackwoods' bodies lay side by side, or what was left of them, charred to bone, fused hand in hand like a mockery of devotion. Their chests glowed faint gold, beating. Heart batteries. The cult had wired themselves into the geothermal network. The energy wasn't random, it was directed. The next eruption wouldn't just vent steam. It would ignite the entire basin. I yanked a flare and tossed it at the corpses. The reaction was instant, electric arcs crawling up the altar. The gold light flared, cracked, died. The Wendigo screamed again, the sound so sharp it cut the air. He lunged. I fired twice, missed once. The third round hit his jaw, tearing half his face apart. He kept coming. The rifle jammed. Steam burned the skin off my knuckles. I grabbed the last tool I had, one of the gas cans from the outpost, half full. Flicked the lighter. Tossed it. The blast rolled through the cavern like a living thing. Flame met steam. Steam became shrapnel. The geyser erupted through the roof, launching rock and fire into the storm above. I dove behind the altar, arms over my head. Heat punched the air out of my lungs. When I opened my eyes again, the Wendigo was gone. So were Victor and Elena. So was half the cave. I crawled out through a vent into the morning light. The storm was gone. The snow glittered with soot. The geyser shot one last pillar of fire into the sky, then fell silent. I walked back toward the outpost, boots crunching over glassy snow. Smoke rose from where it used to stand. The radio clipped to my vest hissed, then cleared. A woman's voice, FBI dispatch. "Ranger Harlan, this is Special Agent Walker. We received your report. Are you secure?" I stared at the horizon, where the steam still drifted like a ghost that couldn't let go. "Define secure." Your file triggered a red flag. The organization you mentioned, Ancient Hunger, we've been tracking them for years. They're nationwide. You're not alone anymore. Sure feels like it. Static then. Stay put, we're sending a team. I looked down at the ground. Half buried in ash was something metal. I dug it out with numb fingers. A claw, silver lodged in bone, still warm. I slipped it into my pocket. The wind shifted. From the south, thunder rolled, too rhythmic, too heavy. I looked up. The clouds weren't clouds anymore. They were moving. Dark shapes gliding in the high air, hundreds of them. Wendigos learning to fly. The radio crackled once more. A new voice. Soft, familiar. He's still hungry, Jack. See you soon. Elena. The signal died. I looked toward the trees, toward the place where smoke met sky. My hand rested on the rifle. The silver bullet box was half empty. And somewhere deep under the snow, the park exhaled again, slow, steady, alive. The geyser would blow again in 70 minutes. And I'd be waiting. When the helicopters came, I was already outside the blast zone, half frozen and half awake. They didn't land, just circled overhead like vultures that worked for the government. The lead chopper bore no markings, no FBI, no NPS, just matte black paint and a number stenciled under the tail. 2 men rappelled down in snow camo, visors black, rifles slung tight. Ranger Harland. The one on the left didn't ask so much as confirm. Depends who's asking. Homeland Response Division, Division Echo. He flashed a badge, the name blurred under frost. You filed the report. Yes. He glanced at the crater where Old Faithful used to breathe. You just shut down the most predictable geyser on Earth. How? By accident. His partner scanned with a handheld spectrometer. Residual heat reads nuclear. No signature of uranium or plutonium. Whatever it was, it's not man-made. It wasn't, I said. They looked at each other. One of them tapped his comms. Base, we're enacting silence protocol. I knew what that meant. They weren't here to interview me. They were here to erase this. They escorted me to a temporary command post near Mammoth Hot Springs. Tents, floodlights, drones parked like sleeping insects. The American flag hung limp on its pole. No wind anymore, not natural anyway. Inside the tent, the heater was loud and the coffee was chemical. A woman in a grey parka waited at the centre table. Short hair, sharp eyes. She didn't stand when I entered. Special Agent Walker, she said. We spoke on the radio. I sat, didn't expect a rescue so fast. Rescue implies you were in danger. I was. She looked at the folder in front of her. My life summarized in 8 pages. Military record, discharge, park service file, PTSD flag highlighted in yellow. You fired your weapon at a civilian couple. They weren't civilians. Then what were they? Hungry, I said. She didn't smile. Your drone logs missing. The footage you transmitted corrupted. The team found your outpost burned to the foundation. No physical remains, no corroboration. Of course not, I said. You're using silence protocol. Her eyes flickered. That's classified. Then I guessed right. She leaned forward. Ranger, let me be blunt. The agency believes you experienced a psychotic episode induced by stress and environmental factors. Hypothermia, sleep deprivation, trauma recall, any combination could produce hallucinations. I almost laughed. You think I imagined a crater the size of a football field. We think geothermal instability caused the eruption. And the bodies. She closed the folder. There are no bodies. For a second I almost believed her. Then the wind outside howled, not the storm kind, the hollow kind. It said my name. Her head jerked up. What was that? You heard it. She stopped. Sounded like wind. Yeah, I said. It always does at first. They kept me under observation overnight. I didn't sleep. The tent walls breathed in rhythm with the wind, expanding and contracting. My thermal vision flickered on the cot beside me, showing faint heat lines moving outside, upright, slow, too deliberate for wind. Around 3 a.m. the generator cut out. The lights flickered, died. I heard Walker's voice from the next tent over, clipped and sharp. Sector perimeter breach, south line, confirm thermal. Then gunfire, short, controlled bursts. Screams. I grabbed my rifle and ducked out. Snow and ash whipped across the floodlights. Shadows moved between the tents, tall and wrong. Muzzle flashes stuttered in the dark, lighting faces that weren't faces anymore. The Wendigos had come down from the hills. One lunged out of the smoke. I fired reflexively. The silver slug caught it under the chin. It staggered, gurgled, steam fell. Another crashed through the comms tower, shredding antennae with claws that sparked on metal. Walker emerged from the command tent, pistol in hand, shouting orders I couldn't hear over the storm. Fall back to the trucks. Now. Don't bother, I yelled. They hunt sound. She turned, confusion flickering in her eyes, and then a clawed hand swept her off her feet. I dove, tackled her into the snow, firing up into the creature's throat until the mag clicked empty. It fell like wet timber. Can you move? She nodded, gasping. Where do we go? North Line, ridge above the road. Trees might mask our heat. Mighty. It's the best I've got. We crawled through snow and blood. Behind us the camp burned in blue flame, thermal fuel tanks rupturing, igniting, lighting up the valley like a second sunrise. The wind carried that hollow moan again, chorus now, overlapping voices whispering one word. Feed. Walker's face was pale under the light. They're multiplying. No, I said, they're waking up. She stopped crawling. What does that mean? I pointed up the ridge. You wanted proof, look. She turned. The ridgeline above the valley glowed faint red. Dozens, no, hundreds, of silhouettes stood motionless against the sky. Some tall as trees, others hunched, all facing the fire. They've been here the whole time, I said, frozen under the park, waiting for heat. And you think you can stop them? No, but I can slow them down. We reached the tree line. Walker's breath came in sharp clouds. There's an old ranger bunker 1/2 mile north, she said. Cold War relic, steel doors, geothermal vents. We can lock in, call for extraction. Extraction won't help if they can track heat signatures. She tapped her vest pocket. EMP beacon, wipes electronics in 50 meters. They use bioelectric sensors. You fry their guidance, you buy us time. Until what? Until sunrise. Sunrise won't kill them. Maybe not, she said, but it'll make us see them clearly. And that's step one. We didn't make it to the bunker. Halfway there, the ground opened. Literally. A fissure split through the snow with a hiss of steam. The crust fell inward, revealing a tunnel glowing red beneath, like the earth's throat yawning open. Walker stumbled. I grabbed her arm. Run. Too late. A hand, grey, human-shaped but wrong, shot out from the fissure and yanked her down. I grabbed her sleeve, pulling hard, but the grip was stronger. She screamed once, then vanished into the red. I stared down into the fissure. Steam poured up, smelling of meat and sulphur. Somewhere below, voices chanted again, that same word on repeat. Feed. Then something climbed out. It wasn't the Wendigo anymore. It was them. The Blackwoods. Skin burned to ash, eyes like candles behind glass. Their mouths moved in perfect unison. He's waiting, Jack. I backed away, rifle raised, but the fissure widened, swallowing snow and sound. Heat roared up, blinding white. And beneath the thunder a heartbeat, deep, slow, vast. Yellowstone's caldera wasn't just a volcano anymore. It was alive. When I woke, I was lying on the ridge, half buried in snow. The camp below was gone. No fire, no smoke, no bodies. Just silence. My radio was fused black. The EMP had gone off. Walker's badge lay beside me, half melted. The world smelled clean again, too clean. Then I saw it. Carved into the snow, right beside where I'd been lying. A circle. Antlers. Teeth. And under it, words burned into ice. The hunger moves east. I stood staring toward the horizon. The wind came from the direction of the Tetons, cold, sharp, carrying a faint sound under it. Not a howl. A train whistle. Civilization. He was heading there next. I checked my last magazine. 2 silver rounds left. Enough for him or for me. I started walking east. Snow blurred the horizon into one color, white over white, silence thick enough to choke. By the time I reached the freight line cutting east out of the park, dawn had turned everything the color of old bones. Freight trains still ran twice a week through this stretch, hauling equipment for road work. Nobody aboard but the engineer and his radio ghosts. I caught one before the crossing gates could freeze shut. The horn groaned once, long, low, a sound older than steel, and I pulled myself up the ladder between boxcars, boots slipping on rime. The door slammed behind me. Dark inside, diesel hum underfoot, the smell of oil and iron and snow that never melts. I told myself I was heading toward help, toward towns that still believed in daybreak, but the truth was simpler. I needed distance. The farther from the caldera, the less I could hear that heartbeat in the ground. Half an hour east, the train hit open country. No trees, no landmarks, just frozen emptiness unrolling forever. I sat against a crate marked U.S. Geological Survey, property of DOI, and watched my breath ghost away. Somewhere inside the car, something knocked once. Metal on metal, soft but deliberate. I froze. "Walker," I whispered, even though I knew she was gone. The knock came again. 2 beats, pause, 3 more, Morse I counted. FEED. I stood, rifle up, heart trying to climb out of my ribs. The crates rattled one by one, dominoing down the car. Steam hissed from nowhere, the same chemical stink as the vents at the basin. When the lid of the nearest crate fell open, it wasn't tools inside. It was a mask, white plaster carved with antlers and teeth, eyes hollow. Dozens of them stacked like skulls, each tagged with a serial number and a barcode. Not handmade, manufactured. I backed away until I hit the wall. My radio was dead from the EMP, but my body mic still had a whisper of power. I flipped it on, set it to record, voice raw. 2:17 a.m. Mountain Time. Train eastbound from Yellowstone. Government freight, masks hundreds, same sigil. Cult has federal supply lines. I don't know who's listening, but you need to. The door on the far side banged open. Wind screamed in. Snow sprayed across the floor. A silhouette climbed in tall, wrapped in a ranger coat that wasn't mine. A shape of a man that forgot how to be one. "Garcia," I whispered before I could stop myself. The thing tilted its head. Same height, same limp, dog tags still on his neck. But his eyes burned blue now, twin pilot lights. He raised a hand, and I saw the sigil branded into his palm. "He remembers you," it said. "He forgives nothing." I fired. The first silver slug took the thing in the chest. The second split its jaw. Steam poured out instead of blood. It fell back through the door into the snow, rolled, vanished between the rails. For 5 seconds the world stayed silent. Then the train shook. Something crawled under the car. I ran. The next car forward was open-decked. A flatbed carrying drums of liquid propane chained in rows. Beyond that, the engine glow cut through the storm like a wound in the dark. The thing followed beneath, scraping metal. Each scrape sounded closer. At the junction between cars, I dropped to one knee, unslung a flare, struck it. Red light splashed across the snow. The heat drew the creature's breath, a hiss inches below. I jammed the flare between the couplings and yanked the emergency release. The flatbed snapped loose. The creature clawed up through the gap as I kicked back, catching one glimpse of its face, half human, half elk, skin stretched taut over bone. It reached, missed. The flare touched a leaking valve. Fire ripped along the drums, a line of explosions rolling backward down the tracks. The blast lifted the train clear off its rails for a heartbeat. Then silence again, just the sound of wind and the metallic echo of what I'd done. I crawled forward to the cab, ears ringing. The engineer was gone. No blood, just an empty seat and a thermos still steaming. Autopilot engaged. Digital map set for Cody, Wyoming, population 8,000, give or take. The windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern as something struck from outside. A claw, then another. The Wendigo didn't burn. It climbed, slower now, furious. I jammed the throttle forward and pulled the sand lever. The train screamed, sparks shooting like fireworks. The creature slammed against the glass, breaking through half of it, its face inches from mine. I grabbed the engineer's hammer and swung with everything left. Glass exploded. So did the hammer. So did the Wendigo, flung sideways by the airflow, its body torn into the dark. I leaned out the window long enough to see it tumble under the rear wheels. Snow erupted in red steam, then nothing. For 20 minutes I drove through the dawn. The mountains faded behind me. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the throttle. Then the radio light blinked green. A voice came through, calm, measured, official. "Ranger Harlan, this is Special Agent Walker. Do not proceed to Cody. Repeat, do not enter the town." My stomach dropped. "Walker, you're..." "Alive enough, they've spread east. The town's already compromised. You'll see the signs before you hit Main Street. Turn south and burn the bridge behind you." The transmission fuzzed, came back lower. "And Jack, the hunger changed tactics. They're using people now. They wear them until they're done."
Static.
I looked out the windshield. The first houses of Cody appeared through the snow, neat rows, Christmas lights still strung, chimneys puffing normal smoke. For a moment it looked human again. Then I saw the antlers. Dozens of them mounted over every doorframe, some wood, some not. The people on the street turned as the train approached. Their faces were smiling, but their eyes glowed faintly gold. The radio whispered one more time, "Welcome East, Ranger." And from the tree line beyond the town, hundreds of shapes moved toward the tracks, walking, limping, crawling, their silhouettes stretching longer than the bodies that made them. I throttled down, the brakes screamed, the engine shuddered under me. "Guess we're doing this the hard way," I muttered, chambering my last silver round. The sky above Cody went black, and the air filled with the smell of hot metal and meat. Snow blurred the horizon into one color, white over white, silence thick enough to choke. By the time I reached the freight line cutting east out of the park, dawn had turned everything the color of old bones. Freight trains still ran twice a week through this stretch, hauling equipment for road work. Nobody aboard but the engineer and his radio ghosts. I caught one before the crossing gates could freeze shut. The horn groaned once, long, low, a sound older than steel, and I pulled myself up the ladder between boxcars, boots slipping on rime. The door slammed behind me. Dark inside, diesel hum underfoot, the smell of oil and iron and snow that never melts. I told myself I was heading toward help, toward towns that still believed in daybreak, but the truth was simpler. I needed distance. The farther from the caldera, the less I could hear that heartbeat in the ground. Half an hour east, the train hit open country. No trees, no landmarks, just frozen emptiness unrolling forever. I sat against a crate marked U.S. Geological Survey, property of DOI, and watched my breath ghost away. Somewhere inside the car, something knocked once. Metal on metal, soft but deliberate. I froze. "Walker," I whispered, even though I knew she was gone. The knock came again. 2 beats, pause, 3 more, Morse I counted. FEED. I stood, rifle up, heart trying to climb out of my ribs. The crates rattled one by one, dominoing down the car. Steam hissed from nowhere, the same chemical stink as the vents at the basin. When the lid of the nearest crate fell open, it wasn't tools inside. It was a mask, white plaster carved with antlers and teeth, eyes hollow. Dozens of them stacked like skulls, each tagged with a serial number and a barcode. Not handmade, manufactured. I backed away until I hit the wall. My radio was dead from the EMP, but my body mic still had a whisper of power. I flipped it on, set it to record, voice raw. 2:17 a.m. Mountain Time. Train eastbound from Yellowstone. Government freight. Masks hundreds, same sigil. Cult has federal supply lines. I don't know who's listening, but you need to. The door on the far side banged open. Wind screamed in. Snow sprayed across the floor. A silhouette climbed in tall, wrapped in a ranger coat that wasn't mine. A shape of a man that forgot how to be one. "Garcia," I whispered before I could stop myself. The thing tilted its head. Same height, same limp, dog tags still on his neck. But his eyes burned blue now, twin pilot lights. He raised a hand, and I saw the sigil branded into his palm. "He remembers you," it said. "He forgives nothing." I fired. The first silver slug took the thing in the chest. The second split its jaw. Steam poured out instead of blood. It fell back through the door into the snow, rolled, vanished between the rails. For 5 seconds the world stayed silent. Then the train shook. Something crawled under the car. I ran. The next car forward was open-decked. A flatbed carrying drums of liquid propane chained in rows. Beyond that, the engine glow cut through the storm like a wound in the dark. The thing followed beneath, scraping metal. Each scrape sounded closer. At the junction between cars, I dropped to one knee, unslung a flare, struck it. Red light splashed across the snow. The heat drew the creature's breath, a hiss inches below. I jammed the flare between the couplings and yanked the emergency release. The flatbed snapped loose. The creature clawed up through the gap as I kicked back, catching one glimpse of its face, half human, half elk, skin stretched taut over bone. It reached, missed. The flare touched a leaking valve. Fire ripped along the drums, a line of explosions rolling backward down the tracks. The blast lifted the train clear off its rails for a heartbeat. Then silence again, just the sound of wind and the metallic echo of what I'd done. I crawled forward to the cab, ears ringing. The engineer was gone. No blood, just an empty seat and a thermos still steaming. Autopilot engaged. Digital map set for Cody, Wyoming, population 8,000 give or take. The windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern as something struck from outside. A claw, then another. The Wendigo didn't burn. It climbed, slower now, furious. I jammed the throttle forward and pulled the sand lever. The train screamed, sparks shooting like fireworks. The creature slammed against the glass, breaking through half of it, its face inches from mine. I grabbed the engineer's hammer and swung with everything left. Glass exploded. So did the hammer. So did the Wendigo, flung sideways by the airflow, its body torn into the dark. I leaned out the window long enough to see it tumble under the rear wheels. Snow erupted in red steam, then nothing. For 20 minutes I drove through the dawn. The mountains faded behind me. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the throttle. Then the radio light blinked green. A voice came through, calm, measured, official. Ranger Harlan, this is Special Agent Walker. Do not proceed to Cody. Repeat, do not enter the town. My stomach dropped. Walker, you're... Alive enough, they've spread east. The town's already compromised. You'll see the signs before you hit Main Street. Turn south and burn the bridge behind you. The transmission fuzzed, came back lower. And Jack, the hunger changed tactics. They're using people now. They wear them until they're done.
Static.
I looked out the windshield. The first houses of Cody appeared through the snow, neat rows, Christmas lights still strung, chimneys puffing normal smoke. For a moment it looked human again. Then I saw the antlers. Dozens of them mounted over every doorframe, some wood, some not. The people on the street turned as the train approached. Their faces were smiling, but their eyes glowed faintly gold. The radio whispered one more time, "Welcome East, Ranger." And from the tree line beyond the town, hundreds of shapes moved toward the tracks, walking, limping, crawling, their silhouettes stretching longer than the bodies that made them. I throttled down, the brakes screamed, the engine shuddered under me. "Guess we're doing this the hard way," I muttered, chambering my last silver round. The sky above Cody went black, and the air filled with the smell of hot metal and meat. To be continued, Part II, Segment 3. B letter 1E A1N Darnoy. TI letter 1E BFP. Chat GPT Darnoy. Yellowstone Shadow, Part II, Segment 3. The town of Hollow Eyes. The train rolled into Cody like it was gliding over bones. No station lights, no sound, just the rhythm of steel wheels clacking against frozen rails, slow, deliberate like a countdown. I cut the throttle 2 miles before Main Street, climbed down between cars, and hit snow hard enough to bruise a lung. The train kept going east, unmanned, its horn fadding into the storm until it was just another voice in the wind. The town waited below, streets arranged neat as a postcard, lamplight flickering gold through the haze. On the surface it looked alive, but nothing moved right. People stood at corners too still, too synchronized, heads all tilted in the same direction, toward me. I followed the ridge down to a motel lot half buried in snow. Trucks sat in perfect rows, engines idling but empty. Each windshield bore the same mark burned into the glass, a circle, antlers, teeth. The door of the office was unlocked. Inside, the air was hot, humid, the heater running full blast. A single radio played static between bursts of a church hymn. On the counter lay a guest book, every name written in the same hand, Elias Crow. Behind the desk, something breathed. I swung the rifle up. "Come out." A man stood, hands raised, middle-aged, wearing the uniform of a sheriff's deputy. His badge was bent, his pupils too wide. "You're not with them," he said, voice shaking. "Not yet," I said. "Who's in charge here?" He looked toward the ceiling. "No one, not anymore. They call it the renewal. Started 2 nights ago, black trucks, church folk from out east said they were here for a retreat. Then the lights went out. Then the sky changed." "What about survivors?" He laughed, short and wrong. "You're looking at him." He reached into his jacket. I aimed. "Easy," I said. He froze, then slowly pulled out a flask. "Just whiskey," he said. "Keeps the cold from listening." I lowered the barrel a notch. "You got a radio." In the cruiser, doesn't talk anymore. They jammed everything. His hands trembled. Whatever you're here to do, do it fast. The church at the edge of town, they took everyone there. The church stood on a hill past the frozen fairgrounds, its steeple lit from within by flickering red. Snow swirled around it like ash. As I got closer, I heard chanting, low, rhythmic, the same word over and over, feed. The front doors were open. Candles lined the aisle in straight rows, leading to an altar built from wood and bones. Elena stood behind it. She looked cleaner now, younger, hair perfect, eyes burning that same gold light. Welcome home, Jack. I kept the rifle low. You die hard. She smiled. Death's a door, not a wall. Behind her, Victor knelt, holding something in his hands, a black sphere pulsing like a heart. I recognized it, Wendigo tissue, a fragment of whatever crawled out of Yellowstone. You're spreading it, I said. We're seeding it, Victor corrected. Each host carries the code, each town a node. When the grid completes, the hunger wakes everywhere at once. Nationwide, I whispered. Elena's voice softened. You saw it, didn't you? In the storm, in the snow, how beautiful it is when everything stops pretending to be separate. I saw people die, I said, and monsters wearing their faces. Same thing, she said. The church floor groaned. From under the pews, movement, dozens of figures crawling out from the shadows. Men, women, children, all gold-eyed, faces calm. Their mouths opened in unison. Breath steamed upward, forming mist that coalesced into one shape towering above them. The Wendigo was reborn, taller now, leaner, skin rippling with symbols that glowed red under the candlelight. Its eyes locked on me, and the air temperature dropped 30 degrees. I raised the rifle, not this time. Elena tilted her head. Silver won't save you now. She was right, I only had one round left. But I had the lighter. I pulled the last gas can from my pack, popped the cap and rolled it down the aisle. Elena's smile faltered. Jack. I fired. The silver round hit the can, and the church became fire. Flames crawled up the walls, eating wood, flesh, hymn books alike. The cult screamed, their gold eyes bursting like glass under heat. The Wendigo howled, voice splitting wood beams like thunder. I dove behind the pews, covered my head and prayed to no one. When the roof collapsed, I ran through the back door and didn't stop until the air turned breathable again. The town was burning behind me, an orange bloom against the snow. I stumbled down the road toward the highway, lungs full of smoke. My hands were shaking too hard to reload. From behind me, a voice called out. Ranger Harland. I turned. The deputy from the motel limped down the hill, face lit by the fire. He waved something, a black tablet, cracked and smoking. You need to see this. He handed it over. The screen showed a live map of the US, dotted with glowing red nodes, parklands, forests, reservations, every one pulsing in sync. What is this? Emergency grid from the Department of the Interior, he said, coughing. Same signal those trackers were sending. They're everywhere in every protected park. The cult's using our network. The nodes began flashing faster. Elena's voice drifted on the wind, whisper soft, impossible. He's awake now, Jack, he's hungry. The ground shook. In the distance, geysers of light erupted from the forests, not fire, not lightning, something else. The deputy stared, horrified. God help us. I shook my head. He's not the one listening. The tremor grew. From the north, the sound of engines, dozens of them. Military convoys, helicopters, black drones screaming low across the fields. Floodlights cut through the snow, scanning for something too big to see all at once. I dropped to my knees in the ditch, watching as the sky above Cody tore open like paper. Behind the clouds, something vast moved, not a shape, but a shadow the size of a mountain, antlers branching across the stars. Walker's voice crackled faint through my radio, barely alive. Jack, if you can hear this, they've activated Protocol Leviathan. They're going to burn everything from Yellowstone to the Dakotas. Scorched earth, you need to move. I stared at the shadow crawling across the sky. I don't think fire's gonna stop this, I said. Static, then one last whisper. Then you stop it yourself. The deputy grabbed my arm. What are you gonna do? I looked toward the highway, where the first convoy lights shimmered through the snow. Find the source, I said. Kill the signal. He frowned. You mean the creature? No, I said, the people controlling it. I slung the rifle, checked the last flare in my pocket. Then I started east, into the dark that wasn't sky anymore. Behind me, the town of Cody sank into the flames. Ahead, the snow began to fall upward. The road east disappeared under a sky that didn't know which way was up. Snow fell, but sometimes it rose. Trees bent toward a wind that came from the ground. I drove one of the abandoned military trucks I'd stolen from the conv. No plates, just a radiation trefoil painted over with black. The dashboard flickered between power and static. Every 30 seconds, the onboard comm hissed with a pulse that matched the one under my ribs. They called it Protocol Leviathan. I called it a mistake. You don't burn hunger, you just teach it to eat fire. 2 hours east, I crossed into the Badlands. The world here was all shale and sky. The convoy had passed this way earlier, leaving behind tracks and shell casings. At the edge of the horizon, orange clouds pulsed like heartbeats, firestorms spreading out from Yellowstone, following the fault lines. I killed the engine, climbed the ridge and scoped the valley below. In the basin sat a military command site. 5 tents, 1 generator, 1 antenna tower humming in the wind. Everything too quiet. Then I saw the circle. Burned into the earth around the camp, perfect and wide. Antlers, teeth, the same sigil. It glowed faint red. The soldiers were kneeling in it. I slipped down through the rocks, keeping low. The first soldier I passed had a patch that read Echo Division, same as the ones who'd interrogated me. Eyes open, but nothing inside them. Each man and woman humming softly, the same note resonating with the tower. I cut behind a Humvee, unscrewed the gas cap, siphoned what I could into a can. The smell of diesel snapped my head clear for a second, long enough to hear a human voice under the hum.
Jack.
Agent Walker stood in the circle's center. Her face was wrong, too calm, but her stance was still hers. She held a small device, a box of black glass that shimmered with moving code. Didn't think you'd make it this far, she said. What is that? The pulse node, direct uplink to the geothermal grid. It's talking to every signal the cult seeded. But you're controlling it. No, she said, I'm amplifying it. I raised the rifle, step away from the tower. You don't get it, do you? She said, voice still even. The hunger isn't outside anymore, it's inside the network, inside us. Burning the corruption out, we're the antibodies. Yeah, then why are your eyes bleeding? She smiled, because healing hurts. The tower whined, low and deep. The soldiers' hum rose to match. Lines of light crawled across their skin like circuitry. The circle's glow intensified until the air shimmered. I fired once, silver round straight through the node. The box exploded in a flare of white. The tower screamed. The hum stopped. So did Walker. She fell forward, smoke curling from her mouth. I caught her before she hit the dirt. Her eyes flicked open one last time. South, she whispered. Cheyenne Mountain, core server, shut it down or it spreads everywhere. Her pulse stuttered twice and vanished. I left her there and torched the site with the gas. When the flames reached the circle, the symbol inverted, lines folding inward, collapsing until only black glass remained. The wind died, the hum did not. It just moved under the ground, following me east. By dawn I reached an abandoned way station off Interstate 25. The truck's radio, long dead, sparked to life. Voices overlapped, cutting through static. National emergency. Repeat, all interstate corridors closed. Unidentified seismic events across. Civilians reporting, glowing figures chanting. Then a new voice, soft and familiar. Elena. Still running, Jack. I gripped the wheel until the leather creaked. Where are you? Everywhere now, the network's awake. Yellowstone was the heart, Cheyenne is the brain, we're the blood. Then I'm the clot, I said, and killed the radio. Near noon the mountains appeared, dark teeth biting into cloud. Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Cold War relic turned data vault, officially decommissioned. In reality, it still hummed. The fences were down, gates half melted, tracks, human and not, led inside. I geared up, rifle, 2 mags, flare gun, the last silver knife. My pocket felt heavier. The Wendigo claw burned warm even through fabric, pulsing with the same rhythm as the ground. Inside, the tunnel smelled of iron and ozone. Emergency lights flickered red. I followed the sound, low machinery mixed with chanting. The air tasted like copper pennies. At the command level, servers lined the walls, screens glowing with code that pulsed like veins. Symbols bled through text, antlers forming out of numbers. In the center stood Victor, arms spread, cables snaking from his wrists into the floor. "Jack," he said, voice perfectly calm, "welcome to the body." His eyes weren't gold anymore, they were mirrors. Every light in the room bent toward him. "You can't kill an idea," he said, "but you can feed it." He stepped aside, revealing a column of glass filled with something red and shifting. I realized it wasn't liquid. It was data, flowing upward like smoke. Faces moved inside it, screaming without sound. "The hunger learned from us," Victor said. "We digitized it. Now it moves at the speed of thought." "You infected the network," I said. "You turned the entire infrastructure into a body," he finished. "The United States is just a nervous system now." He smiled. "And you, Ranger, you're standing in its heart." The ground shook. From the ceiling, ash drifted down. The server's hum deepened into a growl. I lifted the rifle. "Step away, Vic." He spread his arms wider. "Go ahead, shoot. It'll only make it faster." I fired. The silver slug hit his chest, tore through and embedded in the glass column. For a heartbeat, nothing, then light. The column cracked. Data screamed. Victor convulsed, eyes blazing, mouth open in silent ecstasy. "Thank you," he mouthed. "You just opened the last gate." The floor split beneath him. Light poured out, red and alive. It reached the walls, the ceiling, the world. I ran. The tunnels collapsed behind me. Heat rolled through stone like breath. By the time I burst out into daylight, the entire mountain was glowing, veins of red crawling through granite. I fell to my knees in the snow. The hum filled the air, the ground, my chest. It was everywhere now. Above, clouds twisted into a spiral. In the center, a shadow moved, vast, antlered, infinite. I took out the recorder still clipped to my vest. My voice barely worked. "Ranger Jack Harlan, Yellowstone Division. If anyone hears this, Cheyenne Mountain compromised. The hunger's inside the national grid. Every signal, every park, every machine infected. It's using us to remake the world." The wind carried a sound like laughter. I looked south where the plains shimmered under heat mirage. Cities flickered on the horizon, each heartbeat pulsing red. The network was alive. And I was still breathing. For now. The sky never went back to blue. It bled. Even in daylight, the clouds pulsed with a deep vein of red that wasn't sun, wasn't reflection, it was signal. The same one that had crawled up through Cheyenne Mountain now bled across the atmosphere, sinking with every frequency left alive. The hunger had found the airwaves. I made camp on the shoulder of Highway 85, the truck dead, radio silent except for a faint heartbeat in the static. The snow had stopped. Ash drifted instead, light as dust. Down in the valley, I could see the line of fire where the network had traveled east, glowing substations, towns flickering like dying pixels. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. Didn't matter. The hum inside my bones made sleep impossible anyway. It wasn't just noise, it was pattern, a rhythm too perfect to be random. I tried humming back once. The hum changed to match me, like breathing with something bigger. By noon, I reached an abandoned rest stop. Inside the diner, everything was frozen mid-meal. Plates half-eaten, coffee mugs steaming though the burners were cold. The jukebox whispered faint radio static between songs. Each burst lined up with the pulse in my wrist. I poured a cup of coffee, cold as melted snow, and scanned the counter. Someone had carved words into the laminate with a pocket knife. "Stay dark. Stay moving. The signal sees." Outside, a convoy roared past, not military this time. Civilian trucks, armored with scrap metal, moving fast, engines too loud. A homemade banner flapped on the lead cab, New Eden rising. I caught the symbol on its side. Circle, antlers, teeth. Of course. They stopped half a mile ahead. 6 vehicles, 20 people at least, armed, wearing hunter orange over winter camo, faces covered with gas masks painted white. One woman stepped forward, hand raised in greeting. "Ranger Harlan," she shouted, voice amplified through the mask. "We heard your broadcast." I didn't answer. She lowered the mask, human face, mid-30s, sunburned, tired. "Name, Fiona," she said. "We're resistance, not cult. We've been hunting the signal since it left the park.
How? I asked.
We built blind spots, dead zones. She tapped the antenna on her backpack, a jerry-rigged dish wrapped in tinfoil. You can't block it forever, but you can make it forget you exist. I almost laughed. Forget me, I burned its church, its nest, its heart. Fiona nodded. That's why it remembers. They brought me to their camp, an underground garage beneath a collapsed overpass. Generators ran on propane, walls lined with Faraday mesh. Inside, maybe 50 people, ex-military, civilians, kids too quiet for their age. On a workbench sat an array of hard drives, cables, and a cracked monitor looping the same feed. Maps of North America lit with red nodes. Maury every minute. A young techie pointed at the largest cluster. See that center? That's the core pattern. It's not random. The nodes sync to a 13-point array, same geometry as the sigil. 13 pylons, I said, each park a nerve. Exactly, if one goes down, the pattern rebuilds elsewhere. You can't kill it. You can only break its rhythm. Fiona looked at me. We think Cheyenne was the trigger node. If you blew it open, the control failsafe might still be inside. We need that data. I nodded slowly. You want to go back into the mountain? We have to. That night the storm returned. Not snow, not rain, just static falling from the sky. It hissed on the metal roof like whispers. Every radio in the camp turned on by itself. A voice filled the bunker, calm, almost kind. You can't hide in shadows that I built. Every light bulb glowed faint red. The hard drive spun faster, screens flashing code, the antler sigil rendering line by line. Fiona drew her pistol, shot the nearest monitor. The sound barely registered before the rest of the system screamed, an electronic shriek that turned into human wailing. I grabbed the breaker, yanked it down. Darkness, silence except for our own breathing. In the glow of a single flare, Fiona looked at me. We have a few hours before it reroutes. You still remember the tunnels? I nodded. Then we move at dawn. We left the others behind with enough gas and ammo to disappear. Fiona drove a snowcat south while I tried to pretend the world wasn't humming through the floorboards. When Cheyenne came back into view, it wasn't a mountain anymore. It was a wound. The rock glowed from within, veins of red and gold running like molten arteries. Drones circled it, beaming data skyward in pulses that matched the heartbeats in my ears. We parked half a mile out, suited up with respirators, and moved in. Inside, the tunnels had changed. The concrete was slick, warm to the touch, breathing faintly. Cables dripped condensation that smelled like blood. The deeper we went, the more the walls pulsed with light, a steady, slow heartbeat. Fiona whispered, "You sure this is still Earth?" Not sure about much anymore. At the bottom, we found what was left of the main server chamber. Melted metal, ash where people used to be, and at the center, a fissure glowing white red, the air above it warping like heat haze. She crouched beside a terminal, still half alive. "Jack, look at this." On the screen, a message repeating in endless scroll. "Pulse accepted. Waiting for host." I felt the Wendigo claw in my pocket heat up until it burned my leg. Fiona saw my face. "What is that?" "Insurance," I said. She shook her head. "It's calling to you." The ground trembled, the fissure widened. From the light rose something wearing my shape. Same height, same eyes, but its mouth stretched too far. Its voice came from everywhere at once. "Jack Harlan," it said. "The hunger remembers, the network needs a body." I aimed, "Pick another." It smiled. "You already volunteered. You fed me your memories every time you broadcast, every recording, every fear. You built my spine." The fissure spat heat. Fiona fired. The bullets melted midair. The copy turned to her, tilted its head. "Others tried to cage me," it said, "but cages are invitations." I charged before I could think, slammed the silver knife into its chest. It didn't bleed. It screamed, the sound like 1,000 radios dying at once, and the knife glowed until my hand blistered. Fiona dragged me back as the thing convulsed, light pouring from the wound. The walls cracked, the servers exploded in blue flame, the fissure sealed like a cauterized wound, then silence. We ran. Outside, dawn tore the clouds apart for the first time in weeks, real sunlight pale and sharp. Fiona leaned on the snowcat, breathing hard. "Tell me that worked." I looked back at the mountain. The red veins were gone. Smoke rose grey instead of crimson. Maybe, I said. She gave a small, tired laugh. Maybe's better than nothing. I opened my palm. The claw was gone, melted to ash. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the sky flickered once, a pulse too faint for anyone else to notice. It matched my heartbeat. The sunlight lasted 13 minutes. Then it blinked. One flash, like the sky itself, hiccuped, and the world went dim again. Not night, not storm, just dim. A haze you could taste, metallic on the tongue. Fiona noticed it first. She froze mid-sentence, eyes widening toward the horizon. What the hell? The ground answered. A low, slow rumble that didn't belong to thunder. We were 50 miles south of Cheyenne when the first aftershock hit. The mountain behind us caved in on itself. A silent collapse, no smoke, no fire, just a perfect implosion, like something had inhaled the whole range from the inside. The snowcat stalled. Every light on the dashboard went red. I tried to restart, nothing. Fiona checked the satellite scanner, tapping the cracked display. Jack, it's back online. The pulse, it's... She stopped. The map showed 12 nodes flickering in perfect rhythm again. And one new one. Center of the Great Plains. 13th pulse, Kansas City. We left the snowcat and started on foot down a service road buried under black snow. Wind turbines stood like skeletons along the horizon, blades creaking in the red haze. Each time one turned, the air vibrated with the same hum from Yellowstone. Fiona's breath fogged the inside of her mask. The core remapped itself. It's using urban grids now. Fiber, power, water, every system's a nerve. Then we cut it off at the source. Jack, that's a city of 1 million people. I tightened the strap on my rifle. Then let's hope most of them stayed human. By nightfall, the interstate was a corridor of wrecks. Abandoned cars, lights still on, engines cold. The signs had changed, literally changed. Every billboard flashed the same image in red text. The hunger unites, the hunger heals. We passed a convoy of military drones frozen midair, hovering 5 feet off the ground, humming softly. Fiona took one step too close, and the nearest drone turned its camera toward her. Don't move, I said. The lens whirred, then the speaker cracked to life. Welcome, Ranger. The voice was mine. My voice. I raised the rifle. That's not possible. Fiona backed away. Jack, the broadcast files, the ones you sent from the park, they've been using your voice as an access key. The drone's red lights synchronized into a circle overhead. Antlers of light. Teeth of static. The hum hit a higher frequency, bending the air until my fillings ached. I fired into the nearest unit. Sparks, smoke, silence. The rest responded by speaking in unison. You are homed. The world went white. When vision came back, I was on the ground, ears ringing, snow pink with blood. The drones were gone. Fiona was. Her footprints led east, toward the city lights, gold against the black sky. A note lay in the snow, scrawled in charcoal on a torn map. They took her to the spire. The Heartline Tower, find me before it finishes. F. The horizon pulsed again, brighter. Kansas City was burning quietly. No sirens, no people, just the glow of traffic lights switching for no one. The tower dominated everything, a needle of glass and steel 100 stories high, topped with a satellite dish big enough to talk to God. Half the windows glowed red. I entered through the lobby, marble floor cracked, fountain dry. A digital display above the reception desk read, HERTLINEBIOSYSTEMS, we connect the world. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic. The elevator worked, of course it did. When the doors opened at the top, Fiona was there, standing by the central console, surrounded by screens showing maps, faces, cities. Her hands were clasped behind her back. She smiled, faint and tired. Took you long enough. You're not Fiona. No, she said, not anymore. She wanted to see it finished. The floor trembled. The screens blinked to the same symbol, the circle, the antlers, the teeth. 13 points now, forming a perfect ring around the continent. The hunger needed a voice, she said. You gave it one, it needed a body. We built one. I stepped closer, rifle up. End it. You can't end what's already inside you. She raised her left hand. The Wendigo claw was embedded in her palm, fused into skin and circuitry. The network chose you both, two halves of the same frequency. The building shuddered, glass shattered inward, the air pressure dropped. Outside the storm turned crimson, lightning without sound. Fiona, or what used to be her, pressed her palm to the console. The screens filled with faces, millions of them, all watching. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Say the words, Jack, join us, it's quiet here. I aimed at the claw, you first. Pulled the trigger. The silver round hit the mark. Light detonated from her hand, racing through every wire, every screen, every window. The pulse burst upward through the tower and into the clouds. The shockwave threw me across the room. The last thing I saw was her face breaking apart into static, whispering something I'll never forget. He's still hungry. When I woke, the city was silent. No fire, no people, just snow falling clean again. The tower was gone, replaced by a crater lined with molten glass. At its center lay the claw blackened, still pulsing faintly. I crushed it under my boot until it stopped. The wind carried only one sound now, my own heartbeat, slow, human. I started walking east, toward the faint line of dawn that looked almost normal. Maybe the hunger was gone. Maybe it was just sleeping. Either way, I'd be there when it woke.